Welcome to another episode of Commissioner's Corner. I'm County Commissioner Josh Brown, representing Central Kitsap, and I'm here, as usual, with Char Burnett from BCAT. Char, nice to see you again. Happy New Year.
Well, thank you. And here we are already almost at the end of January, and
That's right.
time just flies, flies, flies. So we have a few things that the commissioners are considering, and especially important to your district, Mr. Brown, is the Silverdale Incorporation.
Yeah, that's right. So I know a lot of folks have been following over the past year. There's been a group of citizens who have formed a committee to incorporate Silverdale, which would certainly have profound impacts on the county and really change the direction of things in Central Kitsap. So the vote's coming up. So as we're recording this episode of Commissioner's Corner, ballots are going to be in the mail, and the election will be held. We'll count the ballots up on February 12th. In a special election for incorporation. So to kind of give a sense of what an incorporation approval would mean, Silverdale is one of our unincorporated urban growth areas. We have in Kitsap County about 250,000 people. Out of those roughly 250,000 people, about 75,000 people live in our four cities: Bremerton, Bainbridge Island, Paulsbo, and Port Orchard. Roughly another 75,000 folks live in unincorporated urban growth areas that could eventually be annexed by a city or could eventually incorporate on their own. The two areas that could potentially incorporate on their own as of this point are Kingston, Silverdale, and potentially unincorporated East Bremerton. The rest of the urban growth areas, we're anticipating cities will annex those areas sometime in the future. So Silverdale, while it would be a city of less than 20,000 people, would have one of the largest reserves of sales tax revenue that you could find on a per capita basis out of any city in Washington State. The county, we collect roughly around $16 million in sales tax revenue. Roughly about half of that revenue comes from Silverdale, from the areas that would incorporate. So the county, in terms of our general fund budget, we would lose a lot of sales tax revenue from the incorporation of Silverdale. I think one of the things that maybe folks don't think about, though, very often is our general fund budget at the county funds sheriff's deputies, and it funds our parks programs, which are services for unincorporated residents. We also fund a lot of regional programs through that general fund budget. So we fund the court system. We fund prosecuting felons in any part of our county. So if you get arrested in the new city of Silverdale, you've committed a felony, the county would still have to prosecute that felony. We still would pay for all the jail time associated with that felony. We would still pay for public defense and the court system as needed. But one of the areas where residents that live outside of Silverdale subsidize Silverdale today, in the same way that the sales tax revenue from Silverdale subsidizes regional and other unincorporated services countywide, is our road program. So we have roughly 175,000 folks that live in unincorporated Kitsap County. All of those residents pay an unincorporated road tax. It's a property tax levy that in cities is not collected. And then we receive gas tax revenue from the state of Washington based on a per capita formula. So if you live out in Seebeck, or if you live out in Olalla, there typically aren't many county road projects that we're doing. You know, we're maintaining those roads, but we're not doing expensive capital projects. The most expensive capital projects that we're doing are in Silverdale and other urbanized areas. But in particular, over the past few years, whether it's building Greaves Way, which was about a $13 million project. I think we're going to talk about the Buckland Hill Bridge later in the program. These are large-scale capital projects that residents throughout the county are helping to finance and be constructed in Silverdale, in Kingston, in our urban growth areas. So the vote would have some pretty profound impacts on the county. What I've heard to date from the folks that have been proposing and taking to the public this notion of incorporating Silverdale, while many of them wouldn't live in the new city limits, nor would they necessarily have businesses in the new city. I think what they're interested in is local control and having a city council that that would be making local decisions that would be more focused on local issues in Silverdale instead of the county commissioners providing more of regional leadership. So it's a big decision for the community to make, and most of the residents in the new city would actually live up in the Ridgetop neighborhood. So that's the most populated part of this proposed city, and we have some. It's an interesting part of our county because up in Ridgetop we have a lot of Navy families, a lot of young families, and it'll be interesting to see what their perspective is on this proposal.
Right.
I can't guess which way it's going to go, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not going to
This
ask
is
you anything about your crystal ball.
Yeah, this is the first incorporation effort of any part of our county since I've been commissioner. We've had some large-scale annexations by the city of Port Orchard and the city of Bremerton, but this is the first incorporation. So it's really hard to guess what folks are saying. And the county commissioners very early on, about a year ago, we said publicly that we're not going to take a position pro or con on the incorporation. We're going to try the best that we can to provide the facts and figures for the community to make a decision. But I think what's really tough is that a lot of the decisions that are going to be made that are going to impact the residents of the new city, nobody can determine what those are going to be. The new city council, and if they decide to have a mayor, but in this case they're looking at a city council and a city manager form of government, they're the individuals that are going to be making the decisions on levels of services for law enforcement, how they're going to manage their road budget, whether or not there's B&O or utility taxes. Those aren't decisions that the committee of citizens that are supporting and pushing for the incorporation effort, they can't claim to know what the city council is going to do. But I think what we've tried to do is share information with the public about these are some common experiences elsewhere, and we've had at least one city incorporate in our county in the recent history, being Bainbridge Island. That might be a case example of a jurisdiction that has struggled to some extent with city governance, but there's also a lot of good successes of communities that have been able to really become more successessul due to incorporation. So there's no right answer here necessarily. There's a lot of uncertainty and
so
tough decision.
If the vote is positive, there's still a tremendous amount of work to do to get the city actually established.
Yeah, there's prescribed in state law. There's different deadlines and periods for the governance structure and for the transition period from county governance to the city governance. But yeah, we would have a lot on our plate on our county. I'm presuming that the new city government would be interested in talking to the county about contracting for services, whether it's our sheriff's department or whether it's our public works department to maintain their roads, maybe even parks to some extent.
And then fire. There's the fire issue is another huge
You have the Central
topic.
Kitsap Fire District, so they would have to determine would the fire district continue or would they look to form their own. What's been said so far is that I haven't heard anybody publicly state that they think it's a good idea to form a city fire department, but that's something for the city government to think about. But for us at the county, we would have to have some thoughtful conversations about what role we would be interested in taking on. I mean, to be quite honest, when it comes to road maintenance, we maintain traffic signals for, we help assist the cities of Bremerton, Port Orchard maintaining traffic signals. So there are relationships that we have that make a lot of sense. But if it's a storm event, if we have a blizzard, 1 month, and we have only so many snow crews out and about doing work, and if we're contracting for services with the city of Silverdale to maintain their roads, my neighbors on Anderson Hill Road or out on Seabeck Holly, I'm not going to push them to the back of the bus for clearing snow off of roads in a winter storm just to cater to a city contract. So there's a lot of thoughtful things that need to occur as we're looking at those relationships with that new city. And I think also if the city of Silverdale were to be formed, I think the county would be forced to look at our other unincorporated urban growth areas and be much more assertive in terms of looking at and helping those citizens in those areas determine what should their futures be.
Right.
We have about 30,000 people that live in unincorporated East Bremerton. Some of those folks we're assuming would be annexed by the city of Bremerton, but we have a lot of people that have their kids in the Central Kitsap School District. You know, you think of if your kids go to Olympic High School in East Bremerton, we'd have to work with those neighbors in those communities to talk about are you interested in being annexed by either the city of Silverdale or the city of Bremerton? Are you interested in forming your own city, or are you interested in remaining in unincorporated Kitsap? If it's the latter, remaining in unincorporated Kitsap, due to a Silverdale incorporation, likely the ability for the county to provide road infrastructure or provide sheriff's protection or provide parks would be greatly diminished. So we provide, I think, a pretty good level of service for residents throughout unincorporated Kitsap. But what we're able to provide today, we wouldn't be able to continue to provide throughout unincorporated Kitsap. We would have to provide a more rural level of service, which is a reason why a lot of cities in Pierce and King County incorporated to begin with. It wasn't because the county was doing a great job, which is what I constantly hear about the services we provide. It's because the county was doing a very poor job. And there wasn't law enforcement, there wasn't public works projects, there weren't road improvements taking place, there wasn't the proper planning being done. So a lot of things, I guess the point of this is, you know, if incorporation were to be successful in Silverdale, I think this will have a domino effect on what the role of the county would be for us or other residents throughout Kitsap. It would have to be.
Right. Wow. Wow.
Don't be
Lots of
so
work.
scared.
Yeah.
Let's wait
It's
till
just-
February 12th to figure all this out. But
Wow. Very good ideas, very good topic. So Josh, let's talk about the legislative session. Our state legislature has reconvened,
right.
and lots of issues going on. What are the most important for our county?
Well, I think the biggest issue for us as a state is education. And I don't think it's lost on anybody who's in local government that the conversation about the McCleary decision, which is the Supreme Court decision that basically stated that the state isn't doing a sufficient job meeting its obligation to fund education in our state of Washington, that's going to suck all the oxygen out of the room down in the legislature. So, you know, and I think all of us who grew up here in our state, you know, and whether you're a parent of kids that are in school or you're an uncle like I am of you know, of a 3, 5, and a 15-year-old going to public schools, we understand that that's the biggest issue that the state's going to have to contend with. How do they fund education? How do they ensure that there's a sustainable financing mechanism to be able to support it? How do they deal with the McCleary decision, which is putting some real pressure on the legislature to confront these issues? So outside of that, when it comes, I think, to the Kitsap County commissioners or even broader city and county leaders throughout the state, I guess what we're looking for is the legislature to get serious for the first time about providing flexibility to us at the local level. We have a lot of revenue sources that we can access at the county level, but they're required to be spent on certain things. We don't have a lot of flexibility from the legislature. We have a lot of prescriptive nature of funding sources. And I think we're looking for the legislature to realize that local governments are in the same situation the state is. And in fact, really our resources at the county, if you compare the growth in revenue to the state over a 10-year period versus county government, and here in Kitsap, we have dramatically fewer resources than the state, dramatically fewer. And the recession has hit this county government and has hit local governments, I think, harder in many cases than it has the state government. But we're looking for flexibility. And I think the other part of that we're looking for with some real leadership is on transportation. You know, we have a transportation network in this state where when you leave your house in the morning, you might be leaving a city, you know, a neighborhood cul-de-sac in a city. You might eventually get on a county arterial. You're eventually going to get on likely a state highway. And in our county, you may encounter Washington State ferries to try to get to work or to try to get to where you're going. So, and along the way, you may be riding Kitsap Transit buses if you're trying to commute to work. So we have a combination of partners that are helping to get people to where they need to be, whether it's to get to work, to be able to get their kids to school, to get to soccer practice, to go run errands, to travel, vacation. We have a network of partners. The past two gas tax increases that the state of Washington has proposed, first the nickel package and later the Transportation Partnership Act, both of those packages were very much focused on only state highways. The nickel package, 100% of those monies went to state highway projects. The Transportation Act had, I think, 90% of the funding go to state highways. So city roads and county roads were completely disregarded in those two funding measures through gas tax. Gas tax money cannot be used for transit. So transit agencies were completely ignored. And at the same time, I would contend that while there are a lot of really good state highway projects being done throughout our state and a lot of worthwhile projects, there should have been more money set aside for ferries, both for the capital program about building new boats and also revenue from the gas tax to be able to help control fare increases. So what the county commissioners in our county are looking at, and I think with the leadership of the 4 cities in our community, what we've talked about at the Kitsap Regional Quarrying Council, is we need to have a complete funding package for all transportation. And it can't just be for state highways anymore. We have city and county roads that need maintenance. We need capital projects at the city and county level. We have transit agencies throughout the state that have been cut. We don't have Sunday service any longer in Kitsap County for transit. I was actually coming back from Seattle, some meetings just yesterday, and the woman in front of me was buying a ticket for the Bremerton boat home, and she was talking to one of the ticket folks at the ferry terminal, and she was complaining about the fact that you can't ride a bus in Kitsap County on Sundays.
Oh, that's terrible.
And when I'm on the transit board and I'm standing in line right behind her, I'm thinking, it's unacceptable that folks can't get around one day out of the week, and it's unacceptable a lot of the cuts that we've had to make. But we don't have any options. So,
Josh, can the county form a transportation benefit district like the city of Bremerton has done and city of Bainbridge Island and institute a fee on top of the your car tabs?
Yes, we
to
can.
Go towards roads.
Yes, we can. Yeah, and really the only areas where the legislature in recent history has provided any assistance, and it's kind of hard to call it assistance, is they've just provided local options. And something like the car tab, which has been implemented on Bainbridge Island, it has been implemented in Bremerton, it raises some money. But again, what we're looking for is for a holistic approach to funding transportation. Right. And personally, what I've shared with our legislators, and I think our delegation in Kitsap County gets this, if there's another gas tax proposal that's put out to voters, and let's, hypothetically speaking, let's say that it's a 10-cent gas tax increase, which is what the Transportation Partnership Act was that was approved by the voters several years ago. If there's 10 cents of gas tax revenue, none of that money can go to transit, but there shouldn't be the relationship of 100% of that money going to state highways. There needs to be a percentage that goes to city and county roads throughout the state. There needs to be a greater percentage that goes to our ferries. And then we're looking for the state to get serious about helping to be a real partner when it comes to transit support. So.
And we have a new governor, so who knows how this is all how his administration is gonna really start addressing some of these.
Well, and we finally have a governor who rides the ferries a lot.
Amen.
So
you're right. You're absolutely right.
Governor Inslee, of course, was a Kitsap County resident.
That's right.
I ran into him quite a lot over the years on the riding the ferry to Seattle. So we have somebody who gets the fact that that the ferries are really part of our marine highway system. And of course, he's in a position where the legislature passes the bills, and then he either signs or vetoes them. But but I have high hopes that he'll provide some strong leadership to get our ferries back on track.
Right.
You know, part of it, I know there's been a lot of news coverage about, you know, the waste on the water and issues with the ferries. I get all that.
Sure.
The ferries need to be lean, they need to be mean, they need to be efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But having my dad work at the shipyard for now 35 years and seeing the amount of maintenance and work that goes into getting our aircraft carriers to go out on a deployment,
Mm-hmm.
when you think of the fact that we take for granted those ferries running every day, all day long, nonstop, and when you look at
Yeah, right.
the fact that there aren't more boats taken out of commission, you know, we do have a good system, and there's always room for improvement. But frankly, the legislature has been drowning the baby in the bathwater, and we haven't had the financial resources to build and improve terminals. We haven't had the financial resources to build capital, and ferry fares go up because there's not gas tax revenue to offset it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're picking up a greater share of the operational costs. I think right now, on the operational costs, I think ferry fares cover, I think, 70 or 80% of the total cost. Well, you know, if you ride any other form of mass transit, if you ride a bus, it's usually about 12%. So we're paying our fair share as Kitsap County residents to help support the system, but the legislature needs to get serious about actually funding it.
Amen.
And when boats are going out of commission because they're 50 years old, it's not necessarily, you can't blame that on the workers that are maintaining the boats. I think the blame goes to the legislature that's operating boats that are older than a lot of our nuclear aircraft carriers.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
they wouldn't let my dad work on a lot of those ships that old if they were Navy ships. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, for some reason, the legislature thinks it's okay to put commuters and thousands of people on those boats to get to work every day.
Mm-hmm. That are
It's not
chugging
fair.
along.
Yeah.
Barely chugging along. Wow, another interesting topic. Well, here we go with the third very interesting topic. The 0.1% that the county will be addressing very soon that will support mental health services and chemical dependency options. Those funding sources for those services to our people have been cut drastically.
They have.
And there's a direct relationship of mental health issues and incarceration and just bad things happening that the county and citizens have to take care of.
Yeah.
And this part of our population needs help. So
The commissioners were having a meeting this next Monday, which I think by the
Yeah.
time this airs will have
You'll
already
already have.
occurred. But we're going
Mhm.
to be meeting with many stakeholders and community leaders talking about this local option. To set a little bit of context, again, I mentioned earlier about the car tabs being a local
Mhm.
option.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The state and the legislature completely punted on being able to provide additional funding to sustain mental health, chemical dependency programs throughout our state. Completely punted. And you know, this has become tradition. So what did the legislature do? Instead of providing real funding at the state level, they decided to provide a local option of 0.1%. So right now, our sales tax in Kitsap County is 8.6%. So if this option were to be exercised, it would go up to 8.7%.
Mm-hmm.
They provided that local option to counties to be able to enact it throughout the state. Well, what's happened, quite honestly, is essentially no counties in eastern Washington have enacted that sales tax measure, and a majority of the counties in the Puget Sound region have enacted it. So instead of having a statewide approach dealing with mental illness, statewide approach to chemical dependency, it's being pushed down to the local level.
Mm-hmm.
Now the county, we receive funding from federal and state partners for mental health programs and for chemical dependency programs. We pass through resources to Kitsap Mental Health and to the courts and others that are providing these services. What we're hearing pretty loudly from a lot of these community organizations is that they're tapped out.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're having, due to state cutbacks and other reductions, they're turning people away. And there's a lot of concern that by turning folks away, what are the real impacts going to be in our community?
Mm-hmm.
We know that a lot of the folks that are in our county jail have either mental illnesses or chemical dependency issues. And we have, I think in this county, a lot of good models. Great example is our drug court program, where you get folks treatment at the front end, and instead of those individuals ending up in prison for the rest of their lives, or going in and out of the criminal justice system, we're able to get those folks the treatment that they need. They become citizens that can hold down a job, that can buy a home, that can raise a family. They become upstanding citizens.
And
we save taxpayers money, and we make our community safer. So our Board of Commissioners, we're engaged in this conversation about whether or not we should enact the 10th of a percent for mental illness and chemical dependency. And quite honestly, while we would rather have seen the state of Washington provide that funding statewide, and that's what they should have done, but they punted on it. This is also our community.
Amen.
And when I think when you've seen some of these terrible shootings over the past year, whether it's in Newtown or out in Aurora, one of the common things that comes up is you have individuals that have clearly mental illnesses. And again, we know that a lot of the crime that happens in our community is related to mental illness or chemical dependency issues. So, we're taking it very serious as a Board of Commissioners, the fact that there's serious needs in this community that are going unfunded. If we can do something about it, we should have a conversation about it. So we're going to have the first meeting about this, again, after this has already aired. But at some point, if the commissioners are interested in pursuing this option coming out of that meeting, then we would have a public hearing on the matter. And the Board of Commissioners has two options. One option would be to put this out to the voters for approval. The second option is to take it on councilmatically and enact the measure. And the board would have to determine, which they would pursue. But I think the disadvantages of taking it to the citizens is the fact that we would have to pay the cost of a special election, which would be over $100,000. And we would also have the delay of being able to put that measure in place. So the community conversation's begun, and it's a serious conversation.
It is a very serious conversation, and I bet you'll hear from lots of professionals and lots of people that have benefited not only from drug court but from treatment, and are now giving back and really want to help the community. And it's going to be a lively conversation. Josh, we just have a couple minutes left. Let's talk about the Buckland Hill project, and it's moving forward, and we're going to see probably some action. Yeah,
I guess come February 13th, we'll know if we're actually going to be trying to build a bridge.
There you go. It goes back to that.
If Silverdale doesn't choose to incorporate, the county is moving forward with our largest capital project over the next 2-year period, which is widening Buckland Hill Road. And so I think a lot of folks are familiar right around where Crystal Shores is, between Crystal Shores and the Safeway Shopping Center. We have a bottleneck where we go from 5 to 2 lanes. That's because of a couple small culverts that are very much undersized. We would pull those culverts out and put a new bridge in place. That bridge would allow us to widen this corridor to 4 or 5 lanes, and would also help to provide some good pedestrian improvements. So we're going to have open house in March on this, and again, we'll wait to see the vote in Silverdale, but we think it's a great project that we'd like to try to do in the county. So, Charlotte,
thanks for coming in today.
I want to thank you for all your time and your great questions, and appreciate folks tuning in to getting an update on our community. We'll see you next time.